Little box and a green box. Little box and a blue one. Box and a yellow one and a little and a box and a green box.
Welcome to the You Can Call Me Karen podcast, where we will be trying to uncover the answer to, is the media the fourth branch of government? We want to talk today about our echo chambers of misinformation on social media and why it seems as if there is a growing mistrust in the daily news. It's me, Manny, and I am joined today with Steph.
Hello.
And the only woman in the world who could take a spiteful, stereotypical label and turn it into a persona where she is beloved by all, Karen. Hello, guys.
Hey.
Welcome back. We have been on break for some time, relaxing and eating and indulging and God knows what. They are nodding their head in affirmation. It was nice, right, guys, to take a little bit of a break and reset, but we missed our listeners. We were talking about you guys the whole time we were off. All good things, all good things. So before we jump into today's episode, I was hoping you guys could catch us up to speed. One of the conversation starters that I was thinking you could tell our listeners about is something you enjoyed or might recommend since your time off. Yeah. Karen, how about we start with you, my love?
Great. Well, first off, I have been off of work almost like entirely for about 2 weeks now. So I'm feeling amazing.
That is so important.
It's wild. And mostly home during that time with a short trip to Cleveland. But so because of that, I've been able to watch some TV, which I don't normally get a ton of TV watching time.
Oh, I love this.
Shrinking.
Yes.
Shrinking is my recommendation. It is on Apple TV and it is Jason Segel and Brett Goldstein and is that right?
Harrison Ford
and the woman who looks like Steph.
Yes.
And I'm blanking on her name. She is fire. So watch that show. I cannot recommend it enough. It's all the good feels. It's like
what's it about? Tell our listeners what it's about.
It's like Jason Segel. Yes, does it sound right? Is a therapist who lost his wife. That's not a spoiler. It happens in the very first episode. In an accident, and he has a teenage daughter, and he works with two other therapists, Harrison Ford and Jay. Was it Jay?
Yeah, Jay Tilley. But yes, I'm gonna look it up.
I know I feel terrible, but we'll just call her Steph. And and so they're just like all therapists with their own problems, working through them together, and they have this like network of friends, and it's just very lovely. It's like it makes me feel good. It's sad. It's happy. It's all, and it's funny. It's like really funny.
It's a good sad.
Yeah, it's like makes you So they just wrapped up season 2, and I believe there's at least one more season. I could watch it for forever.
Jessica Williams is her name.
Oh,
Jessica Williams.
I love Jessica
what
Williams.
The hell did we call her? Oh, you know her?
Yeah. Yes, she was on the Daily Show.
On the Today Show.
The Daily Show.
Yeah, she was a correspondent. Yeah.
Yeah, I love her.
So,
and if you guys think I look like her, well, wow.
A lot.
You do.
I look like her a lot. Yeah. Yeah, you have that same like shaped face and
she's beautiful.
And her character is so great on that show.
Her character is so enduring. Yeah.
So 10 out of 10. Shrinking.
And if you like Ted Lasso, it's the same people who wrote for Ted Lasso.
Okay.
If you like Scrubs, I was a huge Scrubs fan back in college. It's like Scrubs and Ted Lasso met and had a baby, and it is just a beautiful. The writing
fire.
especially is like just so clever, and I think it's the number one show on TV right now. So I would echo that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then on the darker side, we've also been watching Silo, which is also on Apple. Holy shit, like a human apocalypse kind of vibe. It's like the opposite end of the spectrum. But, for our listeners who aren't into like feel good, happy, Silo is the answer. Really messed up.
Well, thank you for providing both for
wow.
We are an inclusive podcast.
I'm just trying to be inclusive. That's it.
Steph, what about you? Any recommendations or anything that you enjoyed while being off?
Well, I also was off for 2 weeks.
Yay!
Yeah, and like
from dance and school.
So like last day of school was the Friday, last day of dance was the Saturday, and then I was genuinely off. It was like a busy start because I still like had to do all the presents and all that stuff that I hadn't really gotten to do. But once all that was done, I really like unplugged. So like I wasn't really on my phone very much. And I kind of like made an effort to like, I saw this thing on Instagram, and it was like the immediacy culture, like how quickly we feel like we need to respond to people and like that kind of stuff. And I really just was kind of deliberate about like setting aside time that I wasn't like available, I guess. And I felt way more present, spending time with my baby and with Steve, and I just really feel more rested than I have in a long time. So I recommend shutting it down and
a detox from social media.
I still was on social media.
Not that.
I admit I'm addicted. Like the scroll, but like I just was not as available to like
people.
And I just kind of, I don't know. It felt good. I feel good. I'm ready to go back to school. And I never really say that I'm seeing all these like teacher memes that are like, oh, I'm not ready to go back and all that stuff. And I'm usually right there. And I really honestly feel ready to go. So
that's amazing.
Yeah.
That is.
I am with you though wonderful. On the phone. I definitely spent a lot less time on my phone. Like I was just very conscious to like set it down and be present. And the last couple of days have not been as good, probably because we're at the tail end of the 2 weeks.
Yeah.
But it does make a really, really big difference in my like mental state and my ability to remember things. I just feel like the phone really messes me up.
Yeah, I similarly, I had to what Steph was saying of just setting up a boundary. Not that I have to tell anybody else that this is what I'm doing, but more so, mark as unread has become one of my favorite features on iPhone because I don't have to respond to a text message if I don't necessarily know how I want to respond, right? And sometimes
that is it right there.
Right. And so like mark as unread allows for me to come back to it and not forget about it, which is why I was responding so frequently before, because I was like, well, I got to respond now before I forget about it.
Yes.
So now I use that tool as a feature to help me to just set that boundary for myself.
Yes.
Right. So that I can have more clarity in presence. With all the conversations that I'm having going on. And I want to put a pin in that for our conversation for today, because I think that will come up a little bit later. For me, my recommendation, and again, I just feel like I'm a little bit behind on this, but I too took a day to rest. You guys can follow me on social media on my other account, Educationalist Method. I'm starting a new business model for students and teenagers. So I've been kind of really preoccupied with that. But on New Year's, I took a day to really just be still. and my daughter Brielle asked if I wanted to watch Wicked with her. And let me tell you, that daggone movie, holy moly, it is phenomenal. The costumes, the singing, the energy between the two characters, it all worked for me. I've seen Wicked on Broadway before, twice, and I absolutely love this story and this plot. And the movie did it justice. So I was just so happy about that. And I've nonstop been listening to the Wicked soundtrack. I love the colors. I love everything about that movie. So if you have not seen Wicked and you are in a place to be still for 3-ish hours.
3 hours?
It's like 2:45.
2.5. Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah. But
That's
we
a
watched it when
commitment.
it was out streaming. So that was how
Helpful.
I think I was able to really commit to it, because it is long.
I didn't realize how long it was. I haven't seen it yet, but
And it is just
I will
part
see
one.
it.
I will see
Yeah.
it too. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've already heard the music. It's amazing.
Yeah.
The music, like the Defying Gravity, I cannot get over. I can not get enough of that song. So anyway, that would be my recommendation. If you haven't listened to or watched Wicked yet, please check it out. It's like almost an allegory. It has so much symbolism in it, and it is just a wonderful piece of art. I anticipate it is going to get a lot of awards this season. So yes.
Get that, Cynthia Erivo.
So today we're going to cover a topic we've been discussing in the group chat for quite some time, and that is the media. The subtle messages, the uprise of so-called journalistic experts on social media platforms, and what makes a news source credible. These are all things that we're going to be looking at today. But before we do any of that, girlies, we gotta get to it. Okay. Who you calling Karen this week? Steph, since Karen kicked us off, I'm going to have you go first on this one.
Okay. So, I live in like a cute like suburb town or whatever, and whatever. And the city that I live in has like a holiday parade and a tree lighting at the beginning of December. And it's just kind of like a festive whatever. Santa clicks a button and the tree lights up and people bring their families out. I did not go because it ended up being freezing that night and whatever.
Black people don't do the cold.
Thank you for. I feel very validated that you said that out loud.
I see you, girl.
Do you see me?
Yes.
And so prior to the event, the social media for the city like posts like the tree's here, like we found a tree, and they show pictures of it being carted to the city. It's a really nice, cool tree. There's all sorts of like hubbub, like it's coming, the holidays or whatever. And there's this guy in our town who's like, I don't know, a wannabe like super sleuth or something. He has his own like journal or like news, and he sends out a newsletter to community members. And he is like retired photographer, and he does take absolutely beautiful photos, but he writes an article to go with it. And he announces to everyone that the tree will not have a star at the top of it this year. And that was a deliberate choice of the city because they wanted the event to be more inclusive, and the star has a religious connotation, like the star. So like the tree they kept, Santa they kept, but they did not put the star on top.
Santa they kept though. Santa
and the tree. I mean, these are all Christmas symbols. I don't understand.
Christmas, but not Christian. Like Santa and reindeer and all that stuff.
What is the star?
The Star of Bethlehem. Like that's how they found where the wise men.
Karen.
I mean, I'm not a Christian.
I'm just I don't know.
I mean, it's just a star. Okay, whatever. Okay.
Well, Karen.
I just think if you're gonna have a tree and Santa, like, why stop there?
Right.
Okay, Karen, because that was the story.
I know.
Literally everything you just said, the whole like social media like universe blew up. Where's the star? What happened to the star? Like he wrote the article like the city ditches the star this year or something like that. So then it just created like this whole thing. And I think
meanwhile, if they hadn't put a star up and
nobody would have noticed.
Nobody would have noticed.
Yes, but he not done like he posted it and then it riled everybody up. I think at the same time there was an organization that has a religious affiliation and they also do a parade and theirs is super religious. Like they have a banner that says like Jesus is the reason for the season and they have chaplains and stuff that does a parade and they didn't have the funds and they asked the city to fund it and the city was like, you can partner with our parade and you're welcome to be a part of it, but just know that our parade is not going to include the big Jesus banner. And we want it to be more inclusive and more secular because separation of church and state, like the city just wanted to make sure that. And so simultaneously that the star was being removed, that organization decided that they weren't going to pay the fee to be a part of the city thing. And so their part was canceled. And so it just seems like at the same time, Westerville was like, a war on Christians, like kind of.
Oh my God.
Like, turned into. And I feel like at the root was the city just trying to be inclusive and kind of not dig into, but like the non-religious aspects of the holiday season would be like the tree and the Santa and all that stuff, but not get like Jesus and the birth and the wise men and the myrrh. Like they just kind of wanted.
Did they invite other religious organizations to the parade?
Everybody is welcome to come to the parade.
To participate. The city puts on the parade, and really all that's in it is like the police, the firefighters, Santa. Like it's just like city organization kind of a thing. And the religious group wanted the city to fund their thing. And they were like, we can't fund your thing, but if you pay, or you can pay us and we can hire police to have your parade, but they couldn't afford to have their Christian parade. And they were like, well, you're welcome to join our parade. And they were like, well, we can't join your parade if we're not allowed to hold our Jesus banner. And so they just canceled it altogether. But yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a drama.
Isn't it? And I was just like, I don't know. I just found it interesting that the city was up in arms. A, like you said, if no one's brought it to anyone's attention, no one would have noticed. Or maybe they would have, but it wouldn't have been such a big deal. And B, I feel like in an effort to be inclusive, they kind of like made people mad. And I don't know. I was a little bothered. I think turnout was still good, but like I just was all the commentary.
So who's the Karen? Who are we calling the Karen in this story?
That's a good question. I was going with the community on that.
Like everyone who's posting on social media.
On social media.
I don't know. I think that guy who had to write the story about the star is a bit of a Karen.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the way, like his headline, Chad. Oh, did we ever? Is it Chad? What did we decide on that?
I like Chad. I'm going Chad.
I think it was the Chad article, and calling the city out because like he obviously has an agenda. Like he's like trying to act like he's a journalist, but he had kind of an angle.
Oh my God, this is so good for our conversation for today. I think we're going to dive in deeper into that.
I had two stories, and I saved this one for.
That's a good one. Yeah, we'll have to look more into that
because I saw his account, and his profile picture is like one of those like blue American flags, like
like blue lights.
Yeah. Thin blue line. And I was like, this mofo.
We can dissect that a little bit further later. Karen, do you have a story for us?
I do. It's a little more benign, I feel like, but I just had this strange encounter. So I think I mentioned we were in Cleveland over New Year's and staying with some friends. and I ran out on New Year's Eve to get champagne for New Year's. And I had this nice bottle of champagne that was gifted to me and on Christmas. And I got super into champagne over the holidays. So I was like, I'm going to buy a couple nice bottles of champagne and it'll be fun, whatever. So I went to the store, got a couple nice bottles, was checking out, and the cashier like took them and she was like, "Oh, you're buying the expensive bottles." And I was like, like, how do I respond to, how am I supposed to respond?
This is how
in
I would
that
have
moment?
responded. Throw my hair back.
I was like, oh yeah, we're having a party. I said, we're having a party. I was sent for champagne, and she was like, they better be reimbursing you.
At a party?
This is none of your business. First of all, it was just the most awkward encounter. I didn't know how to react. It I don't know. It's like, I don't know. It just felt so weird to me for you to be commenting on how much money I am or am not spending on my groceries. It was a grocery store. It wasn't a liquor store. Mm-hmm. Anyways, I went back to our friend's house where we were staying, and I was telling them about it. And my friend Adam was like, "You should have responded with, 'These aren't expensive.'"
Oh, damn.
And I was like, why am I not faster on my feet? Like, that would have been just like, these aren't expensive for me. Have a nice day.
And then you would have to thrown money in her face. No, just kidding.
Making it rain, bitch. You know who I am.
Anyways, I don't know if that's like really a Karen, but it just made me so uncomfortable that I felt like a little Karen-y, you know.
I'm Karen, one of the co-hosts of the major podcast. You can call me Karen.
I think it is because we when we were defining Karen last season, we said that it's someone who can't mind their own business, and homegirl did not mind her own business.
That's true. Mind your business.
Mind your business.
Mind your business. Just mind your business. And those are your Karens for the week, guys. So admittedly, I loved the sound of this topic when we first threw it out onto the Google Doc. But they're laughing because I love my Google documents and spreadsheets.
Yes, you do.
But as I started to look more into it, I felt like I was researching for a college poli-sci class. And this topic is very detailed. And it made me question if I was qualified to cover this on a podcast that is, up and coming, and I am just this little mediocre podcast host. So I'm going to not have imposter syndrome, and I'm going to try to push us forward today. I think the breadth and the depth of this topic is really overwhelming. So to help us create a framework, I think we should unlock some of the core subject matters in later episodes. What I was hoping today we could talk about terminology, some of the history, and perhaps your future predictions based on current trends we see on social media. Steph, you just gave us a really good example with with who you calling Karen story. Some of the things that, if we really are paying attention to this concept or this beast that we call the media, what are some of the subtle things that people are doing in order to influence our opinions through social media and journalism? So I think it's important to frame this discussion in such a way that what we're really talking about here is First Amendment rights, and really the question of what authority does the government have to restrict access to information to its citizens. we're recording right now, January 5th. Supposedly, come January 19th, there's going to be a ban on the social media platform TikTok. So we'll be following this story with the changing administration. So I think that's like what makes this conversation so seductive. In my opinion, it's less about speaking out about your government and more about the fact of what makes a source credible. I also think, going back to what Stephanie was saying, this is a conversation about urgency and immediacy. So why is it that people run to TikTok to get their news as opposed to waiting till 5 o'clock when it comes on to one of the more credible stations on TV? And then also, when we say the media, who exactly are we talking about? Is it me putting on my ideological lens glasses and saying the media, pointing to the other end of the spectrum that opposes my ideology? Or is this, what does this like entire term mean? So that's why I think this was really hard for me to like conceptualize, and I hope that we can come to some more concrete answers, or maybe we won't. Maybe it will lead us down more questions. But yeah, that's how I wanted to approach today. So when I say the fourth branch of government, are you guys knowing what I mean by that in terms of they're both shaking their head no? Have you ever heard that terminology before we started talking about it in the group chat?
Not before we started talking about it, no.
Okay. So yeah, I heard this because I used to be a social studies teacher, and I taught government for about 2 or 3 years. And so this term has kind of stuck with me. And when I went to teachinghistory.org, they defined the fourth branch of government by stating journalist Douglas Cater entitled his 1959 book on the practical relationships between the government and the press, The Fourth Branch of Government, convinced that insofar as the press did act as a true political player, rather than an unbiased observer of politics, it corrupted itself and went astray from its primary responsibility to convey important information and to act as a nonpartisan watchdog for the public against all trespassers on their rights. Lately, some political writers have used the phrase the fourth branch of government to mean the voters' power to form law directly through petition or referendum. So my first question to you guys is, do you guys think that journalists can remain unbiased in today's society? Have they ever been unbiased? Why do we need them to be unbiased or even pretend to be? I'm thinking about Pardon the Interruption is one of my like favorite sports shows on TV. That's like one of the only shows that I watch on actual network TV that I religiously come back to. And I'm thinking about Tony Kornheiser and Mike Wilbon, and they are very vocal about the teams that they support and don't support. And so why is this okay in like sports industry and not in like our government and our like other journalism? And why is it so, I don't know. I just let's start with, can journalists remain unbiased in today's society, and have they ever been unbiased? What do you guys think about that?
I feel like there was a time when like journalists were unbiased, and maybe there are journalists who currently are, but I feel like those who are biased are the ones who rise to fame and have the following. Like if you push your specific agenda, people follow because of the immediacy and the fact that you can find, I think in our description we mentioned the term echo chamber. Like people are attracted to hearing what validates their thoughts. And I feel like and I don't want to disrespect journalists, true journalists who do believe in being, straight down the middle. I loved that line that said unbiased observer of politics. Like that's what I think journalists should be. But I feel like what has become popular, like with like Fox News, And then on the flip side, MSNBC continuing to be an echo chamber. Two organizations could cover the same story very, very differently, and speaking to their specific audience. And I guess that's just TV news journalists. I don't know, newspapers and stuff, but I don't know. I don't feel like the majority of journalism is unbiased any longer.
Yeah. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I did not research this. However, I remember learning at some point that I think it was Reagan who changed regulations about journalism. And before Reagan, there was a requirement for a journalist, or I guess a news organization, to present effectively like both sides of a story. And then when Reagan put in place some, I don't know, law, and I shouldn't say it was Reagan, it was probably Congress, right? But it was in his presidency where it took away the requirement to have to present both sides. Does that ring a bell for either of you?
I was listening to, I listen to the radio still, with commercials and all. I don't know.
No, just kidding.
The radio? Is that what you said? What is
bad business for the podcast industry, Steph. Don't admit that again.
I'm sorry, but I love to hear through, I don't know. Anyway, and but through the radio, I listen to The Breakfast Club. Charlamagne Tha God is my favorite, and they were talking about the Breakfast Club brings on politicians, and he was saying that people were like upset with the Breakfast Club because I can't remember who they brought on. Maybe it was Vivek whatever his last name
Ramaswamy.
is, Ramaswamy, and people were giving them a hard time. And he was like, we are legally required to, if I bring on so and so, I have to bring on so and so. Like there is governing. There are requirements. They do have to present both sides. He said that
came up with the You Can Call Me Daddy Kamala interview when people were upset about Kamala going on You Can Call Me Daddy, or You Can Call Her Daddy, or I can't remember the name. But they were like, why didn't she have Trump on? And she came out and said publicly, I did invite Trump. I did invite him to. Yeah. So I'm not sure what the regulations are on that, like I said, I was feeling like a poli-sci college student, and it was midnight, and my paper was due at 1:00, and I didn't have time to research all of it.
I guess going back to the original question of like, do we think that journalists can be unbiased? Where I was going with that comment was like, whether or not they successfully were unbiased before said act, whatever that was, is probably debatable. Like, I didn't read the news before Reagan. I was not alive before Reagan. And so I have no idea whether they implemented that effectively or not. But in today's society with social media and like the access to information, I personally believe journalism is like trying to stay relevant. And so in order to do that, they have to say super provocative things, which are slanted and biased, in order for people to watch or read their platform, which means that, like which is how they get money. So I don't know, like, how would you be unbiased in that world? Like, I think that they're fighting a losing battle at this point, which is frightening.
Yeah, I do think there is some element of capitalism in there of like, how do we keep our industry alive? I saw something that was like, people run to TikTok and Instagram to get their news because it's free. So now you have paid subscription to the Washington Post, New York Times, right? You have to pay to read their articles online. You have to pay to get them delivered to your house. So there is an element of like keeping the press to be accessible for people. But I was thinking about this historically about like I don't know about Reagan, but again, through my teaching, the Alien and Sedition Acts are one of the first acts of Congress that we saw where there was this, what is the right of the press, right? And that's why I was saying it's like a First Amendment, right? Like the Alien and Sedition Acts of like what you can write out legally in press about your government. I guess the core of my question is who determines what bias is, right? And I think that's what we're struggling with right now as a society, right? So like, that's where my like, how can you say that this is bias when this is fact? So what makes something biased in the eyes of somebody who has an opposing view of me? And I think that's where we're like we're not recognizing as a society of like, wait, the real question is, why is this biased to you? You know? So
Yeah, I feel like oh, go ahead, Karen.
I'm jotting this down because what you just said about like who defines what is a bias blows my mind, because you can throw a fact to prove almost any point, right? So like you can say, you can throw out certain statistics to prove a certain point.
Right.
There are other numbers out there that could either disprove or provide like an and this other thing, you know? And so, oh yeah, it's like facts are so murky these days.
Yeah, facts
we
can be
want
manipulated.
everything to be black and white, and everything is gray.
Yeah. Steph,
I was thinking of just like the unfortunate introduction of the term fake news. Like I feel like, as soon as a fact or a piece of information paints you or someone in a negative light or contradicts your beliefs, it's easy to say that's not true, even if it is a fact, or like Karen said, finding another piece of data that could contradict it. And so it just leaves the consumer confused. And so then you just kind of lean into, I just feel like maybe we consumers are not going to news and to information with wanting to know, but wanting to validate.
Yeah.
Like,
well, that
I feel
was
like
why
the purpose has changed.
Yeah. Well, that was why I was like, let's put a pin in this conversation about what you were saying earlier about your rest and restitution and immediacy culture, and what social media has done for our nervous systems and our intellect. And so I'll take a very like, I won't make it political. I'll talk about Ohio State. Okay. I was on Threads the other day, and somebody had posted a clip of the Oregon coach responding to a question, but it was just the clip of the Oregon coach. You couldn't see the question. And all the clip said was, some days you like the odds are in your favor, and today it wasn't in our favor, and it wasn't in their favor when they played Michigan. So when you hear it like that, you're like, what the fuck? Right? You're like, say something else. We just crushed you, right? Like as an Ohio State fan. And then you go into the comments and people are outraged, Ohio State people, because we're like insufferable. And some of the comments are like, you guys, he is responding to a question of how Ohio State has come back after their loss against Michigan. Right. So to your point, Steph, of like, people post salaciously on social media what they want people to react to, going back to the Chad article and the journalist who said only the one part about the star, right?
Yeah.
Just giving just enough information to push an emotional reaction. And that leads me to my question of like this mass exodus from, I saw a TikTok about mass exodus from the Morning Joe show, MSNBC after the election. What does this mean about checks and balances for our branches of government in the future? Like, how are we going to be able to make sure that our information and our sources are credible? Or is that even the government's responsibility, or is it our responsibility as citizens to take a time out and look at the information a little bit more carefully?
Mm-hmm. Wait, when you say the government's responsibility, like, do you mean like in regards to what? Like,
I'm talking about, so like, okay, so what we talked about the TikTok and how TikTok might be banned, but look at when we were talking about echo chambers and algorithms, right? So who has a check on Mark Zuckerberg for and Elon Musk for the information that I get exposed to? Because I don't have access to be able to say, I mean, I can, like, there are certain things that I can toggle with in my app, but like overall, like, they're just pushing certain things into my algorithm, and there's like firewalls that I can't get past in order to see other stuff that would help me to have an understanding of people who might have opposing views of mine.
Right. Manny, I think you've just gotten to the core of this issue, and it is a few things. It is that our government is slow, and so we have not caught up with technology. I do firmly believe that we need some type of regulation for modern day technology, full stop. Social media included, but I mean, there's other things, right, that like our government is just behind on, because the whole premise behind the regulations of the past on journalism is that we should not allow corporations to operate without any guardrails, because consumers don't have the same amount of resources and access that corporations have. And so the whole premise is like protecting consumers. As a consumer of information, we should not be expected to have to read something and decipher whether it is fact or not. Like, we should hold these companies accountable for what it is that they're doing. Now, how you do that, gosh, I'm not a politician, and my business acumen only takes me so far. So I don't have a good answer for that, but I just can't overestimate that, like, our government is slow and behind and needs to really catch up. And we're seeing little hints of it, right? With like, earlier this year, I think Florida banned social media for children 14, under 14. I think that's brilliant. I think, I think that,
especially coming from Florida.
I know. I was very confused. I was very confused by that, but bravo, Florida. Like, that is brilliant and like needs to be, I think, federally implemented.
Yeah.
But then I do think that only solves a portion of the issue. It's saying that we don't trust children to be able to decipher the information that they're receiving on social media, but we do trust adults, which is clearly not working either, right? Because of all the things you've said, they target our, like, the way that our brain works and our urgency for information, and they exploit that. And then it's creating this like massively polarized environment where if we had access to other information, we could at least make more educated decisions for ourselves on what we believe to be true, what we want, what we don't want for our government, or, sports, or whatever, whatever thing that we're passionate about. So I don't know.
I feel like remember how I, like, when I was like, well, I listen to the radio, and
and we were like, loser.
What's that?
But the
radio, who needs a radio?
But the radio and like in network news and those kind of mediums do have federal law that requires balanced information, and social media is the wild, wild west. And it was not created I don't think in its infancy, like, what thought that it was going to be people's primary source of receiving news. And so to Manika's point that the government is slow, or I'm sorry, that was Karen's point, that the government is slow to catch up with the fact that people are using that as a news source. And I feel like when there's a news source, there should be regulation, um, not to get rid of free speech, but if you're going to present information as fact, then there needs to be research and there needs to be accreditation and it needs to be balanced. Like, just thinking back to teaching eighth grade English, an argumentative essay, you have to have a counter argument and you have to have evidence from both sides for it to be a truly argumentative essay. So I just feel like there does need to be some sort of regulation, since we are headed to TikTok and to Facebook and to Instagram for news, period.
Well, that's a certain generation. There's also another generation that does solely like fixate on cable news as well. And cable news has capitalized off of their addiction to cable news, and they are not presenting only facts. They are more argumentative and opinionated on their news networks.
Well, and I wonder, I want to know, because I feel like back when you were saying why we don't just wait till the 5 p.m. news, like our parents did, you know what I mean? There's this immediacy culture because of the 24-hour cable news networks that has to fill 24 hours. I'm thinking of Anchorman.
A whale's vagina.
You have to fill 24 hours of news. And so they're just going to say whatever comes in. And I don't know what the regulation is for, cable news, but network news is, I feel like, under more traditional, I feel like when I heard it, I'm pretty sure the acronym was FCC, but I don't know what that stands for. But at what point does the FCC include social media and cable news networks? I don't know if cable news networks are included in that.
They have to be included in order to be called.
But is it because maybe a station like Fox News, the show itself, they are more pundits, they're not necessarily.
It's the difference, I think, between an op-ed, when you write an opinion piece versus. And so you can get away with a little bit more when it's entitled opinion, but
all their programming is very op-ed.
And
same with MSNBC.
Well, I'm gonna wrap us up because we're running out of time. But to your point, this all goes back to the original question of can news remain unbiased because programs are people? Right? So the people, it's not the political pundits who are sitting at the chair who are the face of the network. It is the puppet masters behind the people who are sitting at the chairs. Again, go watch Wicked. It is these people who run the networks, right? I'm thinking about also Succession. I loved that show. The people who run the networks have an agenda as well. And so when you're saying the FCC and these government programs, it's well, what are the moral and ethical principles that they are following in order to maintain that our news is unbiased? And are they? And we've seen several lawsuits recently against these news networks and organizations because they aren't following the ethical principles, but they have money. They have money to pay so that they don't have to. And so, so I think, I don't know, I'll wrap us up with, okay, I had 2 more questions, but we can table those. Do you guys have any confessions that you want to bring to light? If not, I can give us another question to take us out.
Well, I think, so my confession is the bias definition thing. Like you said, how do you define bias? And that kind of blows my mind because I always in my mind thought it's black and white, something is fact or something is slanted. And I just feel like now I'm going to think of that statement so differently, because if you watch CNN or if you watch Fox News, they are going to be convicted in their belief that they are telling a factual story based on true information, unbiased journalism, and they will come out with completely different stories, right? About potentially the same exact thing. And like, depending on your political beliefs, you're going to look at one or the other and be a little bit more aligned with one in all likelihood. And and so it's just wild to me to think about, like, actually there isn't, like, bias is not clear. It's like, it depends on which vantage point you're looking at something from, whether you believe it's biased or unbiased. And so then how do you solve that? It's so murky. And this just goes back to, like, the whole premise of, like, these discussions is, like, lots of things can be true at the same time. There's not always a yes or a no and a right and a wrong. It's like, there is so much gray area and so much complexity in our world. And that's just another thing that, like, as soon as you ask what the definition is, I'm like, shit. I've been living a lie.
I think that's like, when I talked about framing this conversation, I said it's important that we discuss terminology and vocabulary, because sometimes, what we use as language sometimes might not be what we're actually meaning is the definition of that. Sorry, Steph, what were you going to say?
Well, my confessional, like, somebody who I follow on social media is Dan Rather. Do you guys follow? I just love him.
Yeah, he is very gentle in his approach.
Very gentle in his approach, and I feel like he has bias. He has opinions, and you know where he leans politically, but he talks a lot about the responsibility of the journalist to make sure that you are balanced. And he's really, like, calling back to a day when we do all turn on the news at 5:00 and trust that the information is valid. And so what I'm thinking about is just, like, people who are giving us news, whether it's kind of like a cable news program, whether you're putting out information on social media that's considered news. I feel like there was a time when journalists had this, and I'm not trying to dog people, but this, like, integrity and sense of responsibility that when what we say is important and does impact government, as in media is the fourth branch of government, and we have a sense of responsibility. And what has murked that is capitalism. And the fact that, like, which we brought up at the beginning, is that money is driving the fact that we consumers are biased, and we're just going to chase after what makes us feel good. And what makes me feel good is somebody saying, things that I 100% agree with.
Yeah.
And so I feel like, part of it is, if we can maybe, part of it is, at what point do we go back to journalists having that sense of responsibility and understanding their role and how it impacts government. And also, a guy I follow, I don't have the link to it or anything, but it's Brian Tyler Cohen. I follow him. And that obviously may give away my political leanings, but
it's pretty obvious.
As if our listeners were unclear.
If you were wondering. And he really talked about the fact that the organizations that are conservative are blowing up, and he's finding that the conservative politicians are willing to be interviewed by these right-leaning organizations, and the left-leaning people are turning down opportunities to be a part of this, like, you know what I'm saying?
And
this trend of, like, being okay. So it's like, on the flip side, I think that both sides need to be doing the same thing, if that makes sense. Like, it's like,
I feel like that was one of the criticisms against Kamala's campaign. I saw both. Like, why are you doing this? Like the left didn't really know how to step into that stratosphere. And it was, like, divided in a sense on, like, what that should look like. And you're seeing that, the right is starting to take
really
a little bit more of, Yeah.
And that's
So
scary.
yeah.
Mhm.
So we've come to the end of our podcast, but I will say to kind of bookend what you were saying, Steph, about like the responsibility of journalists, and like this is really a conversation about integrity. But I don't think it's the responsibility of the journalist. I think it's the responsibility of citizens to not want to jump in to the quick news flash, like
Mhm.
breaking news, and think that you are credible to present this information to a
Mhm.
broader platform, right? And who am I to say that as somebody who's hosting a podcast right now and we are like putting our
Mhm.
stuff out there? You know, maybe we're doing the same, and maybe I'm, having a Johari window effect right now. But like, it is, it is something that we, as consumers of information, are going to have to be more mindful of when we put out a product. If we do have this freedom to put out our products, then we have to make sure that we have some integrity and some ethical pillars aligned to the products that we put out, to make sure that we are, just contributing to the harmony of society and not the harm. So, anyway, this was a wonderful discussion, you guys. So happy to be back. Karen, you have a last word?
Yeah, well, just in the spirit of being able to disagree, I disagree. I
Ooh.
just think that expecting every person, every citizen to like quote do the right thing is unrealistic. Otherwise, like I just think government needs to set boundaries and set guardrails on like what information can be put out, how it can be put out, and inform consumers better of what information it is that they are absorbing or receiving. I just like we have 300 million plus people in this country, right? Like to expect everyone to do their
Right.
research and know
No,
how to do their research and stuff.
I wholeheartedly take what you're saying. I'm saying in the meantime, because our government is so slow, and
Yeah.
because we have 300 million people, what does that even look like? How does that look
Yeah.
like that a government official would come to your house and say, "Don't post that. You're not right." Like, or what does that look like? We're going through the internet and the
Not on
ecosystem.
It's not on the individual. I think it's on the corporations. It's on the
Mhm.
Facebooks and the Metas and the Googles and the
Yeah.
Twitter, or whatever they're called these
Yeah,
days. Like it's on all of those corporations to have to follow certain regulations.
I think
Um,
that they're trying with the fact check. Like I feel like some
yeah.
things like, but it's not
it's
enough.
just our government is too slow
You know,
to understand what needs to be done and put proper controls in place, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't know how that would look if somebody is building a platform on TikTok based off of this persona that they're going to bring breaking news about, let's say, like Gaza or whatever. They really believe that they are credible enough to do that when they haven't gone through the education and the process of. And that's the whole thing of how this all started, of like what makes something biased incredible. Like, do
Mm-hmm.
you really need an education to be able to do this? Like, where does that, going back to Steph's point about integrity, like, what makes something, what makes me you putting out this content? Is it
Mm-hmm.
because you have a degree? Is it because you have decades of experience? Is it because you've gone back and forth and looked at both sides? Like, I
Right.
think that is something that, like, what what does that look like?
Yeah.
Is
How
No,
it
I
like
mean,
a
I don't know.
it's
licensure?
it's a
A
it's a
licensure,
very
exactly.
but
Mhm.
that is the way that it was designed originally. Like that is what a journalist is. You have to have a specific license. You have to have an education and understanding of the regulations of what you can and cannot report on.
Mhm.
I listened to a podcast with it was an interview with John Oliver because he does Last Week Tonight, and he's not
Yeah,
a journalist, but they do a lot of very journalistically styled stories.
yeah.
And so, but in the guise of satire. And so, like, he was questioned about, like, do you see yourself as a journalist? But
Mm,
then he would be held to different standards on what it is that he can report. So, anyways, like, even in those environments,
fascinating.
it's
It
really
is.
interesting.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I don't have a good answer, but I do think this is why we have government to be able to
Mhm.
protect our citizens in
Mhm.
and give us access to information on both sides, on all ends of the spectrum, or all parts of the spectrum, in a way that is productive, and not divisive. And like, we have gone way off the rails, in my opinion, on that. And it's all, to Steph, your point, it's all in the name of capitalism. It's all money. Yeah. And so if we could somehow take money out of things, then maybe we could make better decisions on behalf of our people and not on behalf of our corporations. Says the business person. So I realize a little bit of a contradiction.
Well, I think that every platform started out with a certain intention, and it's just morphed into competition between, like, remember social media was just about pictures and posting, and now it's become something like a lot more than that. So yeah, I think you're right that, like, maybe it's that we need less, right? Maybe it's that we don't need to be inundated with so much information. Maybe the regulation is to take away how much we've like built this into, and then just like slim it down a little bit and make it more digestible for people. So I don't know, to be continued, Guy. This was lovely. We uncovered a lot. I don't know if we answered anything, but we definitely kept it classy, sassy, and a little badassy. I don't know.
You're really trying.
I'm reaching. See you next time, listeners. Thanks for joining us.
And the fox, and the green one, and the fox, and the blue one, and the fox, and the yellow one, and they're all made out of ticky-tacky